Welcome to the GameSmith's Table Talk. This is a roundtable format discussion where I and my guests try to cover 3 tabletop role-playing related topics in 15 minutes. If you know anything about tabletop role players, then you'll know that this is an ambitious goal. Let's head to the table. Welcome back to our Table Talk podcast. I'm your host, Clayton the GameSmith, and joining me are...
I'm Franklin.
I'm Cheryl.
I'm Clark.
Let's head to the table.
The views and opinions of the panel are their own and do not reflect the views and opinions of any other individual company or organization. This podcast has been known to be opinionated. You have been warned.
For our next topic, we're going to talk about backstories. And in terms of character development, doesn't matter. Character background can have a great influence on your character, depending on the type of background that you have, depending on the story that you're playing. Or you could have very little influence for you sit down at a brand new table. It makes no difference as to your backstory. What I'm curious about with our panel today is backstory. Does it matter?
I would say backstory absolutely matters. As a player that likes to go with a concept first and then try and make the mechanics work after, I think a backstory is something that definitely endears me to the character, gives me a connection. I don't feel like my character's expendable, or if I put the time in to have a realistic history and a background, the geography where the character's from, what kind of connections, if any, does that character have to any of my other characters. For example, I have probably about 6 different characters on the go at present, and I usually like to make no more than one connection, whether there's a connection between 2 characters from different campaigns or from within the same campaign. I like to limit it to that, so you don't get that Star Wars-y feel where everything has to be related to or connected to something else. It just keeps it a little bit more realistic, but by having a history and a background, it definitely gives a more involved feel, it gives a more immersion to the story, and it's nice when you have a GM that also includes that information and weaves it into the campaign, so you feel like your character's history does matter.
Agreed. I mean, it's a really good vehicle to provide hooks for your GM and hooks for yourself to actually be there. When I first started playing role-playing games, not a lot of background in those characters, mainly because, hey, you played one, you could die. I find that when you have backstory, you do get more invested in that character.
Absolutely.
Right? It gives you, the player, direction on where your character's going as well.
I find the same thing as the predominantly GM, that some of my NPCs that I've invested in a backstory, it matters to me what happens to them. In a lot of cases, particularly in pre-printed adventures, where Paizo's, is really notorious for this in their APs, where they'll have a magnificent backstory for an NPC that the PCs promptly murder, or they never run into, and then it feels like, well, that was kind of a letdown, or it's like, why is this person in here? The characters aren't even going to run into this guy. Or if they do, the encounter is set up so that they are going to push past or push through him or run right over the guy. And it's like, well, a page and a half of text about this guy's backstory really isn't necessary.
I would say, especially looking at things from a player perspective, background matters exactly as much as it does to you, the player. There are some players that it will make a huge difference for, and other players who just really don't need to invest that much. To some extent, you'll want your backstory to be a little bit flexible. I've had characters where I've written up somewhere in the neighborhood of 2 to 3 paragraphs to a page-long backstory, and then in the first session, I'll make some change to it completely on the fly that then goes on to be one of the most memorable things about that character. There is also sort of a danger, I think, in developing too much backstory, in that it creates a character who's focused kind of backwards. I've seen a lot of players, and this is sort of a trap that new players fall in especially, I've seen a lot of players who create a character with a very rich and very well-written backstory, but then the whole point of them playing the character becomes finding ways to exposit about their backstory. And they don't look at how you take your backstory as where your character starts, and as the seed from which they grow going forward.
Yeah, that's definitely something that I find new players experience more than experienced players. An experienced player is absolutely going to know that your backstory informs your present actions. Backstory isn't your present actions. It only informs the decisions that you make now, so that your backstory is slowly revealed, where other players at the table, it's like, why did you do that? Oh, well, when I was a child, blah, 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 blah. So I have this thing against blah, blah, blah now. Oh.
Another trap that people fall into, and new players, old players, experienced players, all do it as well, is you make the background, and then you keep it secret.
Yes.
And then you get upset because nobody cares about your background. If the background is so important to you, then you have to find ways for it to come up.
There has to be some mechanism for it to share.
Or to bring it to the forefront yourself.
Absolutely.
As a point of interest.
It doesn't necessarily mean your character talking about it.
No.
But you could find ways that the character maybe has a subconscious tick or something like that that gives clues and hints about who they are.
Absolutely.
It also becomes really valuable that if you're wanting this kind of information revealed, that you should absolutely talk about it with your GM, so that the GM can provide mechanisms or vehicles for that information to be revealed.
This is true, yes.
That some stranger from the past shows up who has information for you or reveals something about your past and you're like, uh-oh. Or, yeah, I know that guy. Ignore him.
Yes, but a super cautious note here is don't get so wrapped up in your background that when you talk to your GM and the GM says, that's great, realize that the GM is then going to make that their own.
Yes. You have now lost control.
Exactly.
This is true. As a GM, anytime a player has handed me a copy of their backstory, I've always approached it from the perspective of, this is what you know about your story.
Yeah.
Then there's the other part that you don't know about.
And let me tell you, to all the players out there, if you trust your GM to take that story and run with it, you will have vast amounts of enjoyment.
Mm-hmm.
If you rigidly say, no, this is exactly what happened and you're messing with it, then no one's going to have fun in that. I mean, we had a player, who was, this is in our DC universe, he was a Nazi from the past, got frozen ice, a la carte Captain America. But
the Nazi version.
The Nazi version. He had a very clear view of what his past was like. Once his memories came back, and I air quoted that. But Clayton, as our administrator, also had a different version of what actually happened.
Yes.
And it took a while for it to come out. But when it did, the son of the clone of a demon,
Yes.
we talk about it all the time. That was massive, and the player had a huge amount of fun with it. So also be aware, not only will your GM run with that backstory, but your fellow players will too. I mean, if you let, this happened to my character, blah, 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 blah. For instance, once again, back to DC, because that's the one we had massive amounts of backstory in. One of my character went to university. Her time at the university was huge in her backstory. She lost a child, she lost her lover, anyway. But another character also had a background where she went to the same university. We didn't talk about it beforehand or anything like that. But during play, we wove those two stories together. Hey, my character is not happy with the other character, Rose. We don't get along at all well. And then through our play together, our backstory also reflected that.
And also evolved as in exposition at the table.
Yes.
So when you're playing with people that you can trust, to say, hey, I went to that university too. Really, I took so-and-so's class. I took that class too, but I always sat in the back. Oh, that's probably why I didn't ever see you, because I always sat in the front row.
Exactly. Always remember, role-playing is about cooperative storytelling.
Yes.
And if you sit there and say, oh, my backstory is this rigid construct, you don't give anybody else time to engage with it.
Absolutely.
And they won't care.
Yeah, and I found that experience too, where you are invested so much in a character that you have a very specific background, but then the campaign you're in takes it in totally different, interesting directions that you never would have thought of, and all of a sudden your background becomes more of a collaboration with your GM as to what their story is.
Do you have a specific example in mind?
Yes. Yes. I have one character, it's a Paladin Oracle Gestalt, and I had a very specific background, but the campaign that we're in takes us in different directions in a totally different part of Galarian. And we collaborated on a background that actually fits the campaign but still keeps the essence of the character that I originally made myself. And I'm even more invested in the character now because it became more of a creative, collaborative experience.
Yeah, because the background that you'd written was adjusted to have sort of the essence of the same story, but to fit within the story, the larger story that the GM was telling.
Exactly, yeah.
You know, we talked a little about the flexibility. And yeah, having a little bit of flexibility in your backstory is absolutely vital because it lets you adjust to how things are going. It lets you change things up on the fly. Maybe have just a very short one paragraph, few sentences on who your character is, a few cliff notes about important events in their life, and expand on that as you need it.
Right, and having that flexibility also makes the character more accessible, both as a player and as a GM. That you can take that character concept and put it into almost any variety of setting or adventure.
It gives a GM, a hook to get you tied into the story about how, let's say, for example, your character has a background where they were running with a gang. That gives the GM an opportunity to say, okay, so-and-so was a member of your gang back in the day, and you know this person because of that.
Right.
It gives very concrete ways to integrate your character into the larger history of the world. I do have a quick note. This is a partial aside about background generators. I really like them, but you have to be careful about how you use them. These are things like Paizo has their official one in Ultimate Campaign. There's a whole bunch of charts. You can find dozens and dozens of them on the internet for all kinds of settings and things. The two biggest things I would say if you're using a background generator, first and foremost, nothing that comes out of that generator is set in stone. Make something. If you don't like it, reroll it. It's totally fine. Second, what you get out of the generator is a seed. You should be looking for 2 to 5 concrete moments or ideas in your character, and then you take it upon yourself to string those together to see what kind of an interesting story you can create out of that.
As someone not familiar with background generators, this is totally randomized. Parts of your character they try and amalgamate to make a concept?
To talk to the Paizo one, because that's the one I'm most familiar with, again, this is the charts in Ultimate Campaign. You'll have a chart of, say, family members. You roll on the chart and it'll say, oh, your mother and father are alive. And then you go to the next chart and you roll on it. It says their occupations are, one's a painter and one's a sculptor. And you go on and go on and go on. What was a major event in your childhood? What's a major drawback or major flaw that your character has? Who is an influential associate? It gives you these little, I kind of see them as, placing
footnotes.
Footnotes, placing the dots on the map of your character, and then it goes to you to figure out, all right, how do I connect these together? But you have to build from what you get from the generator.
And and just to reiterate what Franklin was saying, it's not cast in stone, right? So you could say, okay, my parents are alive. I like that idea, but I don't like that they're both artists. So I'll hit the randomizer again, and one's a warrior and one's a cleric. Oh, I like that.
That's
Take what you like and leave the rest.
And leave the rest.
Yeah.
And then just weave it together, and then it's like, oh, I have 4 siblings. What are their sexes? I'll roll that up randomly.
That's interesting. I might try that out as somebody. I'm constantly looking for ideas or little plot seeds or...
Yeah, and that's the value of it. They give you a place to start from, but you never want to just take what it gives you and take it at face value.
Right.
Always try and build from what the generator gives you.
Okay, well, it seems that we're running out of time for this podcast. I definitely want to talk more about this. We could talk more about the charts and stuff like that. I'd also like to talk more on how much is too much. So listen for our next podcast, and we'll see you guys at the table.